the strongest earthquake to strike Malaysia in over a decade, just released the energy equivalent of roughly 45 Hiroshimas beneath the island of Borneo, and not a single building collapsed. Magnitude 7.1 according to the USGS depth, 619.8 kilometers, approximately 55 kilometers north-northwest of Kota Kinabalu. Met Malaysia recorded it at 6.8, depth 678 kilometers. The discrepancy itself tells you how far beneath the surface this rupture occurred. USGS pager models estimate 5.6 million people exposed to moderate shaking. Felt reports from 14 cities. Maximum intensity, 3. Weak to light. No aftershocks. No tsunami threat. No structural damage confirmed. Since Video 1, the official story has not changed. And that is the problem. Because the reason nothing collapsed has nothing to do with the buildings. It has everything to do with depth. And depth is the only thing that saved Malaysia from what happened 11 years ago. When a quake, 1/16th as powerful, killed 18 people on the same island. But here is the detail that tells the real story. In 2017, Malaysia published its national annex to Eurocode 8. Document MSEN 1998-1, 2015. National Annex 2017. The country's modern seismic design framework. It specifies how new buildings in seismically active zones must be engineered to resist lateral forces from earthquake shaking. It exists, it is published, it is referenced in engineering literature across Southeast Asia, and its application is voluntary. Unless a local regulatory authority specifically mandates compliance, a developer in Sabah can build without meeting a single seismic provision in that document. No penalty, no enforcement mechanism, no inspection trigger. The code sits in an archive. The buildings sit on the ground. And the distance between those two things is the distance between what happened on February 23rd and what will happen the next time the rupture is not 620 kilometers deep. On February 23, 2026, the Earth moved with a force that would have flattened structures in a shallow event. The buildings in Sabah did not fall, but the code that was supposed to protect them was never required to be inside them. A 9-year-old document, written for exactly this threat, filed, referenced, cited, and never enforced. To understand how Sabah arrived here, watch the timeline accelerate. On Sunday evening, February 23rd local time, the rupture occurred at approximately 619.8 kilometers beneath northern Borneo. Within minutes, seismic waves propagated upward through more than 600 kilometers of mantle rock, losing energy at every layer interface before reaching the surface. USGS registered M7.1. Met Malaysia recorded M6.8. The discrepancy is a function of different station networks, different depth models, and the fundamental difficulty of measuring a rupture that deep. Within the first hour, Met Malaysia Director General Dr. Mohd Anip confirmed no tsunami threat. By Monday morning, felt reports had been logged across 14 cities, 35 responses on the USGS Did You Feel It? Platform, maximum intensity CDI3, light shaking, objects rattling on shelves, no walls cracking, no floors buckling, no collapse. By Monday afternoon, Met Malaysia confirmed no aftershocks had been recorded, consistent with deep focus rupture behavior. Where the surrounding slab material is under such enormous pressure that secondary fractures rarely propagate. USGS issued a green pager alert. Low probability of casualties, low probability of economic losses. International agencies stood down, media coverage shifted, and that is where the story should concern you. Because the speed at which this event was classified as non-damaging is the speed at which the systemic vulnerability beneath Sabah's building stock disappears from the conversation. An M7.1 hit. Nothing fell. So no one is asking what would have fallen if the depth had been 15 kilometers instead of 620. Here is the problem that is not making headlines. Sabah sits near the convergence zone of 3 major tectonic plates, the Indo-Australian, the Eurasian, and the Philippine Sea Plate. And the forces acting on the crust beneath northern Borneo are not simple. They are compressional, rotational, and layered. The February 23rd rupture did not occur on a shallow crustal fault. It occurred within a subducted slab, a sheet of oceanic lithosphere driven deep into the mantle over millions of years. At 620 kilometers, the rock is under such pressure that it behaves almost plastically. When it fractures, the energy release is enormous. But the distance that energy must travel to reach the surface means most of it is absorbed, scattered, and attenuated long before it shakes a single building. B. Navakanesh, research assistant at the Southeast Asia Disaster Prevention Research Initiative at University Kebangsaan Malaysia, described the event as deep slab deformation. He stated that much of the energy was absorbed before reaching the surface, and that there should be no risk in terms of major surface damage. Pijiol Mud Nur Ismail Abdul Rahman, senior lecturer in marine geoscience at University Malaysia Terengganu, confirmed that deep quakes can be felt widely, but are usually weaker at the surface, and that aftershocks are typically smaller and less frequent. That is why nothing collapsed on February 23rd. Depth. Not engineering, not codes, not preparation, depth. Now remove the depth. On June 5, 2015, a magnitude 6.0 earthquake struck Ranau, Sabah, shallow, crustal, directly beneath populated terrain. 18 people died. Landslides ripped across the slopes of Mount Kinabalu. Infrastructure failed. And the energy released was a fraction of the February 2026 event, roughly 1/16th, but it arrived at the surface with almost none of it absorbed. The shaking was direct, violent, and concentrated. That is the comparison no one is making right now. Malaysia just experienced a quake 16 times more powerful than the one that killed 18 people. The only variable that changed was depth. And depth is not a design feature. It is not something engineers can control. The next shallow rupture on the Crocker Fault system or the Mensaban Fault will not announce itself at 620 kilometers. It will arrive at 10 or 15. And it will test every building in Sabah that was built before 2017 and every building after 2017 that was never required to meet the code written for exactly that moment. And then it got worse. Not on February 23rd, on 11 years earlier. On the morning of June 5th, 2015, the Ranau earthquake struck at shallow depth beneath the western flank of Mount Kinabalu. Magnitude 6.0, crustal, direct. The shaking triggered massive landslides across the mountain's granite face. 18 people were killed. Among the dead were climbers who had ascended the mountain the day before. Victim deaths, names, shuts on ages needed. Ranau, 2015 climber victims. They had reached the summit. They were on the way down. The mountain came apart beneath them. Boulders the size of vehicles broke loose from the Via Ferrata route and swept through the descent path. Rescue teams worked for days to recover bodies from terrain that had been physically rearranged by the shaking. That event is the template, not the deep slab rupture of February 2026. The 2015 Ranau quake proved that Sabah's geology can produce surface rupturing earthquakes with enough force to kill, to trigger slope failures across an entire mountainside, and to destroy infrastructure in seconds. It was not a theoretical risk. It happened. People died. The mountain itself changed shape. And in the 11 years since Malaysia published its Seismic Code Annex, the document exists, but the enforcement architecture around it remains voluntary at the local level. That means the building stock in Kota Kinabalu, in Kota Belud, in Ranau, and across northern Sabah includes structures erected before 2017 with no seismic design requirement, and structures erected after 2017 with no mandatory compliance check. The code is not in the walls, it is in a file. On February 23, 2026, 5.6 million people were exposed to moderate shaking from a deep event that could not hurt them. They felt the ground move. They ran outside. They checked their walls for cracks, found none. And then they went back inside, into buildings whose seismic capacity has never been tested by a shallow rupture and may never have been designed for one. The relief that followed the green pager alert is understandable. No one died, nothing fell, but relief is not resilience. And the absence of damage on February 23rd is not evidence that Sabah's buildings can survive what the Crocker Fault or the Mensaban Fault will eventually deliver. It is evidence that they have not been tested yet. The 2015 earthquake tested them. 18 people did not survive that test. As of this recording, Met Malaysia has confirmed no aftershocks from the February 23rd event. USGS maintains a green pager alert. No damage, no casualties, no investigation opened, no emergency declaration issued. The event has been classified, cataloged, and for most purposes closed. Except the event is not the story. The event is the warning. Malaysia's strongest earthquake in over a decade just shook 5.6 million people across Sabah. It released the energy equivalent of roughly 45 Hiroshimas. The buildings did not fall because the rupture was 620 kilometers deep. Not because the buildings were ready. The seismic code exists. Enforcement does not. The 2015 Ranau quake proved that Sabah's shallow fault systems can kill. The Crocker Fault system and the Mensaban Fault have not stopped accumulating stress since that day. They are closer to failure today than they were yesterday, and the building stock sitting above them is the same building stock that has never been required to meet the code written for exactly this scenario. How do you tell 5.6 million people who just felt the ground shake and walk back inside that the buildings they return to were never required to resist the quake that will come from 15 kilometers instead of 620? How do you explain to the families of the 18 people who died on Mount Kinabalu in 2015 that 11 years later, the seismic code written after that disaster is still not mandatory? And if a magnitude 7.1 can strike Sabah and cause zero damage only because it ruptured at 620 kilometers? What happens when the Crocker Fault produces a 6.0 at 10 kilometers beneath Kota Kinabalu on a Monday morning? The National Annex to Eurocode 8 is still published, still referenced, still voluntary. The document held. What it was written to protect was never required to meet its standard.